Attention deficit disorder is normally associated as a childhood condition, but you say this is no longer the case. You yourself were diagnosed with ADD
yes.
as a young adult, while you were in medical
I'm
school.
55 years old now. I was diagnosed in 1981, so I was, 30-something, in early 30s. I'd gone through college, medical school, residency. I was doing a fellowship in child psychiatry when I heard this condition, attention deficit disorder, described. I'd never heard of it until then. And I said, wow, there I am. And I went through the procedure, was diagnosed, yes, indeed, I have it. I really didn't need treatment at that point, but the insight, simply knowing that there was a name for this collection of symptoms that I had wrestled with for my whole life, was a tremendous relief.
Now, let me make sure I understand. I mean, the reason that it's so underdiagnosed in adulthood is because we've always suspected, because symptoms disappear in children around puberty,
yes,
that was the end of it.
Yes.
But in fact, your research shows that about 2/3 of children carry those symptoms on into adulthood.
Yes, and in fact, the symptoms don't disappear during puberty. That's one of the myths that we used to believe, and I don't quite know where that came from. It is true that some kids get over it during puberty, but what happens more often is what happened to me. I learned to compensate so well that it looked as if I didn't have it any longer. But I was still wrestling with the condition, am to this very minute. And that happens to millions of adults. Now, for a good fraction of them, it's causing no problem, so no need to do anything. But for a hefty percentage, it is severely holding them back in life.
Well, in fact, you make a point in your book that in adulthood it kind of no longer looks like a disorder, and it almost becomes a trait, a personality character. How does it manifest itself? What are the symptoms of adult ADD?
Let me start with the positives, because people don't usually mention the positives, and the positives are abundant. Creativity, energy, intuition, the ability to think outside the box, a tendency to be a maverick, want to do it your way, independence, persistence, tenacity, often to the point of being stubborn. All of those qualities are really very positive and very useful in the world. However, they can get buried under the negatives. And the negatives, trouble getting organized, trouble staying focused, trouble staying on task, tendency to hop from topic to topic. Attention deficit is really misleading. It's not a deficit, it's a wandering, it's a vectoring.
So in fact, you can be very focused for some point.
Super focused, but maybe on the wrong thing. Or super focused on the right thing. You go into these states of tremendous focus. People say you don't have ADD, you can focus. That's not true at all. You can be amazingly focused.
When you talk about wandering, what happens? The mind all of a sudden switches to something else?
As if the TV channel were changed. You're somewhere else. And in the middle of a conversation, you'll be talking to someone, and then suddenly you realize you're just watching his lips move, and your mind is, at the ball game, or at the meeting you're going to go to next, or what you did last night, or what you're going to do tonight.
Now, you yourself have said that this is a very seductive diagnosis. That once you read about all the various symptoms, virtually anyone can say, "Oh, I see myself there." And as a consequence, some critics have said, this is just a made-up disorder. It's a function of a fast-paced life. Everyone loses concentration. What do you say to those cynics?
Well, first of all, I agree with them. You've got to be careful in making this diagnosis, and I would caution listeners, you'd have to be comatose not to identify with some of these symptoms. Living in the modern world, we all are like this some of the time. But to the person who say it doesn't exist, I'd simply tell them, first of all, there's an abundance of hard scientific evidence, brain scans, genetics, that show this is a real condition. If you are very distractible, if your mind is constantly shifting, and it is causing you to underachieve in your life, that's a disorder, and that's different from ordinary overwork, frenzy, multitasking modern life.
But lest any of our viewers think this is a trip to Hollywood, having adult ADD. I mean, there are some scary statistics in your book. Is that about 25% of people who have adult attention deficit disorder also have bipolar problems of manic depression. 60% drug and alcohol addiction associated. Why is that? Why does ADD kind of come with these other disorders or afflictions?
Well, it's genetic, and I think the core issue is what I call the itch, the itch at the core of ADD, the itch that you can't scratch. In chemical terms, it's a relative depletion of dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure.
Right.
And people with addictions, people with bipolar disorder, people with ADD, people with mood problems, all tend to have trouble